I don't usually tell you the title of the message, and please don't be offended, those of you that take offense to things like this, but I'm going to do it. Thanksgiving is more than the Lions losing again. And if that was really bothersome to you, and I hope that no one will call the Lions organization and say that I misspoke about them, but Thanksgiving is more than that. And if that's all that you look forward to, and their loss again is just going to ruin your Thanksgiving, I feel badly for you, but they tried, and we're thankful for that. Grateful for that. I want to ask you this morning to think for a moment, what are you thankful for? I know these are a few days after Thanksgiving, but it's always good to think about what we're thankful for. I loved being with my family. And for those of you that don't have extended family, thank you for being a part of this family. I am thankful for you. I'm so grateful for you. I love my freedom. I'm thankful for that. I enjoy turkey. I'm thankful for that. I enjoyed a day off. And I love the promise of what Thanksgiving is all about, and truly being thankful. In the story that we'll read today, when the pressure is on, and I mean hot and overwhelming, Thanksgiving takes on a whole new perspective. I'd invite you to this morning to turn to Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6. Two things that we want to look at this morning: that no reason for Thanksgiving. When you look at this part of the story, there seems to be no reason for Thanksgiving. And then secondly, all the reason for Thanksgiving. No reason for Thanksgiving and all the reason for Thanksgiving. Daniel chapter 6. I'm going to start reading in Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. And you know what I do with my Bible? I want you to know I write all of my notes, and I include all the scripture so that I can read it, and it's in large print. And it's right here, except for Daniel chapter 6, 1 through 9. You have a Bible here. That's good. Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. So now the pressure is really on. How long is it going to take Joel to find Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 9? Well, don't you worry about it. I'll get there eventually. Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. I'm almost there. Thank you for your patience with me. By the way, how was your Thanksgiving? I've already asked you that. I'm almost there. Thank you. And that was another thing I was going to do. I was going to write down the page so that everyone would know, including Joel. Daniel chapter 6. These new Bibles are nice, except the pages are stuck together. Oh, Joel. I'm almost there. Thank you for your patience with me. Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. It pleased Darius to set over the king's kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the high king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement and said to the king, O Darius, King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction, that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius agreed and signed the document and injunction. Look at those words, and I'm trying to, for a moment, imagine myself in Daniel's position. I want to say initially how it describes Daniel is something that we should look at and be extremely, extremely grateful and also amazed and admire so much Daniel's good position. It says in verses 3 and 4 that he distinguished himself with exceptional qualities, and the king had taken notice of his character. That's what we want in this world, don't we? With people that we come in contact with, if it's in our neighborhoods, if it's at work, it's in the circles that we meet with, we want people to notice the Holy Spirit's effect on our lives. And that was very, very true. It says he had distinguished himself of that and had taken notice of his character. And I love the words that it says specifically in verses 3 through 4. No corruption. Wouldn't that be nice if we could say that about leadership in our world today? No corruption, trustworthy, not negligent, and that he shouldn't be taken, none of those things should be taken lightly. All of those things that are stated in verses 3 and 4 and describing Daniel's character and who he was and the kind of person he was, none of that should be taken lightly. Grateful, incredibly grateful for those characteristics that can be said of him. And he was in a position to be placed in high authority. That's what we want, isn't it? We look forward to opportunities where we as believers can be in positions where we can be making a difference. And if we don't get the presidency of the United States, there are some other positions that we can have influence on others as well. And Daniel had that position of authority. And so in those things, it looked really pretty good. Things were moving along quite nicely when it came to Daniel's character, but then the wheels began to fall off in those verses 5 through 9. He began to be tested. The testing was not being loved. And for those of you that hold deeply to that, and your characteristic in your life, there are different personality characteristics. One is having people that you want to be at peace with people. It's called the phlegmatic personality. You want people to get along with you. And if that's your personality, that's hard. That's difficult when you find that people don't love you. The people that we're talking about, the other leaders, the other people that were being placed in leadership, they were jealous. They were attacking where they made him vulnerable by their standards. The things that would make Daniel seem to be vulnerable from the rest of the world, different from the rest of the world, that's what they were shooting arrows at him with. And that's tough too. They were attacking where they made him vulnerable by their standards, but not Daniel's God standards. But the testing was real, and it was difficult, and it was hard. I remember hearing a coach, a high school football coach, telling me what life is like as a coach. On Friday night after a football game, they will get together with the other coaches, and they will discuss what they did as a team. They'll look at film already on Friday night to determine mistakes that were made, things that they could do better as a team. Then they'll get together again on Saturday. What kind of a life is this, by the way? They'll look at the opposing team, the team that's coming up, film from their game just the night before, and their mistakes, the things that they do wrong, and their vulnerabilities. And if you can imagine someone focusing on your vulnerabilities, that's what the world may want to do in relationship to your walk with Jesus Christ. If you're sensitive to wanting to please him, to love him, to honor him, in the world's eyes, that can be a vulnerability against what they think is and what they hold to as most dear. And that's what they were doing with Daniel. And when you get to the theme of thanksgiving, and when you look at these verses, if you can imagine for a minute being in his shoes, he is not in his hometown. I don't know what happened to his parents. Good chance that they were killed at the same time when the other country came in and took over. That his parents are gone, and he's a teenager in a land that is not his own. Not only is he a teenager in a land that is not his own, he's no longer a teenager. He's grown up, but he's gone through not just one king, but a few. And now he's in the king that overtook his country. That king was overtaken by another one. So he's on his third country now. And there doesn't seem any reason to be thankful. And I know that those of you that know the rest of the story, I'd ask you not to think about that. I'm going to say that several times to you today. Because you can say, yeah, what we know what happens today, and I know you know. But will you think about being in his shoes just for a moment when it comes to this concept of being thankful? So there was no reason, when you look at Daniel's life and you think about what was originally happening, there was no reason for thanksgiving, or at least so we would be tempted to think. Then we read verse 10. We read verse 10, and this is what verse 10 says. If you look verse 10, it says, Daniel chapter 6, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went into his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks. He prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. I can tell you, I can read those words and I can feel immediate conviction. Those are times in my life when the wheels are about to come off that I can feel nothing. Thanksgiving is the farthest thing away from my mind. In the difficult situations in life, what in the world was Daniel seeing that led him to be thankful? And again, as we read, let's not read with preconceived idea of knowing what's going to happen at the end of the day. But putting ourselves, thinking of ourselves, of the conflict that Daniel was facing, what in the world was he thinking about? Think about what was on the line. And if you don't know the outcome, I've often said that Daniel had it all wrong. If I was reading and writing what I was thinking at that time, these are the words that would come to me. This is the way verse 10 would have looked like. Given the current situation, verse 10 might have better read like this. When Daniel considered the decree and how hurtful his peers had been, he went to his basement where no one could see him and silently prayed as he fell on his face and asked, "Why me, God?" He could only bring himself to do this once a day, fearing that his enemies would assume that what he was doing, and he figured that he would be of more benefit to God alive than dead. And certainly God couldn't expect Daniel to trust him, considering it was such a disaster. Now that would have been the way that's the way I would have handled the situation, most likely. I'm not going to my upstairs room where everyone can see and pray 3 times a day with the curtains open, thanking God out loud. No, not me. Not me. I'm not doing that. But Daniel did. That prayer that I just read for you, if you're wondering how it was so easy for me to come up with it so quickly, because that's natural for me. That's my natural tendency to head in that direction. It's because I'm good at it in real life. Now, I don't say that to God. I don't say to God, "Why me? You're a loser, God. Why did you do that to me? What kind of a God are you?" I don't do that out loud. But in my heart, my mind, sometimes I say, "Do I really deserve this, God?" I don't really verbalize that. The only problem is that God knows my thoughts too. That's a bad thing, and it's a good thing too, because he still loves me. And even though I might think of the bad things that are taking place in the situations that I don't understand, I don't say it out loud, but my actions give me away. Oh, and the part about a man of God saying, why me? Look at, we're going to have these words from 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 4 up there. These are the words that it says right there. But he himself went, I'm sorry about that. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with a sword. For those of you that don't know what that verse is talking about, there was a conflict out on Mount Carmel where the prophets of Baal had been sacrificing in front of the people of Israel. And God had told him that he was to confront that. So here was Elijah, and it seemed like there was nothing but ungodliness in the land of Israel. Ahab told Jezebel, so when Elijah goes up onto the mount, he has this great victory. He tells the people, all the prophets of Baal, that they're to offer a sacrifice. And all these prophets of Baal offer a sacrifice. And Elijah says, this is the problem, this is the deal. Whoever can have fire come down from heaven to burn up their sacrifice, that is the true God. So the prophets of Baal are just, they're cutting themselves with knives, they're yelling, they're screaming, and Elijah comes. When it's all said and done, he asks God to glorify his name, and God brings fire. And Elijah goes in God's power and in God's direction and kills all the prophets of Baal. And the queen is not happy. That's where we started. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with a sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, it is enough now, O Lord. Take away my life, for I'm no better than my father's. You think of the great thing that God had just done through Elijah, the incredibleness of all these prophets of Baal not being able to call fire down from heaven to burn up the sacrifice. And they're going on and on and on and on. Just little lowly Elijah comes by. He douses the sacrifice with water, so it'd be difficult to set on fire. He calls down God. He calls to God and asks God to give glory to himself, and God does it. And Elijah, in the strength that God gives him, in the face of evil, goes and slaughters all the prophets of Baal because that's what God told him to do. Wow. If you again can put yourself in Elijah's shoes for a moment, what an incredible, incredible victory. But then Jezebel says, you're dog meat. And he starts cowering like a child, like, oh, I'm going to make it. He himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and asked that he might die, saying, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I'm no better than my father's. When I had a professor in college that said, whoever told you that you were better than your fathers anyway? Like, who told him that? I mean, that was his own conclusion. Pretty high and mighty of Elijah there for a moment. So who said that you were greater than your father? But in the moment of his deep distress, he cries out. Elijah was used greatly by God, and I have no intention to mock him because I struggle more than that. But notice Daniel's response to the situation with thanksgiving. I love that. Why could he do that? Why could Daniel face the situation of thinking that he was about to lose his life? Why could he do that in the face of such distress? I believe that Daniel sought to be intentional when it came to thanksgiving. At times, thanksgiving was actually a part of Israel's history. In 1 Chronicles chapter 23, and I'm not against you looking at these verses in your Bibles, but 1 Chronicles chapter 23, verses 28 through 30. For the duty, this is talking about what the people in Israel did, the sons of Aaron, their responsibility with the worship of God. Each of them, their responsibilities was. In verse 28 it says, for their duty was to assist the sons of Aaron for the service of the house of the Lord, having the care of the courts and the chambers, the cleansing of all that is holy, and any work for the service of the house of God. Their duty was also to assist with the showbread. This sounds like all kinds of weird details, doesn't it? Cleaning, preparing food, what's up with that? But yeah, it's important here. Their duty was also to assist with the showbread, the flour for the grain offering, the wafers of unleavened bread, the baked offering, the offering mixed with oil, and all measures of quantity or size. Yada, yada, yada. And they were to stand every morning. Read this last line with me, would you please? Thanking and praising the Lord. That was their job. That was their duty amongst the people when situations came up to remind them, we're going to thank and we're going to praise the Lord. That is part of who we are. That is part of our makeup. We are going to worship. We are going to make part of our worship thanking and praising God. And perhaps that's what Daniel was recalling. That was a huge part of their early worship. Someone was designated to think thanksgiving. That speaks of intentional to me. Planning on Thanksgiving, making sure that Thanksgiving takes place. So if they might be tempted to forget, there was someone to remind them to be thankful. I love that. That speaks to me. Let me ask, are you a person like that? Are you a person that finds yourself in the midst of life when life is not easy, that you can be thankful? Or that you know someone that tends to respond in that kind of way of thanksgiving? I appreciate people like that. I'm glad that Sharon is in the Sunshine Choir right now, because she would know that this is not an amen for Joel. This is something I need to work on, and something that needs to be a part of my life. One more example for us to read of, and this is of Jonah's life in Jonah chapter 2. In Jonah chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish. Now let me stop there for a second. Thankful? Seeing a thankful position in the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me out of the belly of Sheol. I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. And I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters, this is not a pretty picture, the waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. Are you excited about that? I know you know the end, but please don't read it like you know the end. Think about weeds being wrapped on your body, surrounded by water. At the roots of the mountains I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit. O Lord my God, when my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. And I know you know where this is going, don't you? Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. Read verse 9 with me, will you please? But I, with a voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. And I love that. And you say, but Joel, if you just read the Latin, the next few verses, you know that the fish spits them out. But not before he gave thanks. In the situation that he was in. He listed for us in the first 7 verses, not a pretty picture. Nothing beautiful, nothing pretty about it at all. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Not a bit pretty. not a circumstance that we would want to be in. And I know that our minds go quickly to the fact that the whale spit Jonah out on dry ground. I'm thankful for that part of the story too. I am. But when he's making this prayer, thanksgiving, he's doing it from the belly of a whale, with weeds wrapped around him, with water swaying. And I cannot imagine, maybe you have thought about this, you people that like to fish, being in the belly of an animal like that for a long period of time, how stinky it must have been in there, how gross, I hope I can say the word gross in church, gross it was. It was nasty, nastiness. And from there, thanksgiving comes. From the belly of the whale, he's thanking God. And if you're thinking, oh, if you just read the verses later, the words of thanks are not words that are magical words, and because he gave thanks, he was spit out onto dry ground. Not at all. They're not magic words, but they show an indication of what our heart's inclination is. The focus of our hearts to realize the realization that God deserves all of our thanks and all of our praise. Sometimes our mindset is that we want to win. We want to prosper. We want to be comfortable. I want a nicer car, bigger and better home, no bills, everybody happy with us, loved by all, hated by none. Then, at that point, we'll be thankful. And that's just not a world that you and I are going to live in. But being a choice of being intentionally thankful in the world that we live in, that is possible. That's not where Jonah was, and it certainly wasn't where Daniel was. But they both gave thanks under their circumstances. And to be honest, that's convicting to me too. Doesn't always have to be you, but it resonates conviction to me. You may not feel that, but it is convicting to me because under circumstances that are not my favorite, thankfulness is not something that I intentionally think of. So when the wheels do fall off, what is it that we and how do we respond? I'm not saying pastor to clerk's name to gain brownie points, but it's something that I will say often at a funeral is that after the end of reading the obituary, he would often say to the people that were mourning, people that had lost their loved one, he said, when the dust settles, when you're back and you're all alone, and the time has come where you were able to just reflect, he says, I hope you'll take time to thank God for what you have had. And I know that the idea of giddiness is not what I'm not saying that when life is difficult that we become giddy. I'm just saying that at the times, even when we're going through hard times, there is something that we can be thankful for. A series that we had in Sunday school with our college age, it showed people that were suffering greatly for Jesus Christ, that people that were going through so much heartache in different countries. And when you'd hear them speak, they weren't speaking like they were in just that life was just terrible for them, but they would speak of thankfulness. When you look in the New Testament and you think of Paul and you think about all the things that he went through, and we were reminded of that in our Sunday school class this morning, all the things that he went through. And yet how often at the beginning of his letters does he talk about how thankful that he is? Talks about the fact that he was flogged 5 times. The very event that maybe some of you have seen in the Passion of the Christ. It's not just a slashing, but a ripping of the flesh. And we think about that, and his response was thanksgiving. I know that I have to be intentional when it comes to that. Doesn't mean that I have to be giddy about all that happens in life. And some of you have gone through some very, very difficult things. Loss of a loved one, disappointment in your job, disappointment financially. I'm not asking that any of us should be giddy, but we have something. And Pastor DeClerc's words still ring out to me. I'm not worshiping Pastor DeClerc, but I love what he would share in those moments. It was a great testimony to me then, and it is now. That we can be thankful, even in the midst of disappointment and heartache. We still have something to be thankful for. And it also represents our great Savior. Robert G. Lee, a pastor who lived in the 1900s, wrote this. I have to read this to you slowly because I read it 5 times, and you're not reading it, you're listening to me, because I had to make sure I got this right. Though right it is to give thanks, true gratitude will live thanks. Though right it is to give thanks, true gratitude will live thanks. And this from Billy Graham. Grumbling and gratitude are for the child of God in conflict. They're fighting each other. Be grateful and you won't grumble. Grumble and you won't be grateful. Grumbling and gratitude are for the child of God in conflict. Be grateful and you won't grumble. Grumble and you won't be grateful. I don't worship Daniel, but I worship his God, my God. But nonetheless, I must tell you how thankful I am for Daniel's testimony of thankfulness. In the midst of hard, tough times. And I'd like to end this with a quote from none other than William Shakespeare. Where in the world does this is not Macbeth, it's not Hamlet. I can find myself requesting the same thing, though, that he did. O Lord, that lends me life, lend me a heart replete with thankfulness. How many of you know what the word replete is? Good, thank you. I didn't either. Replete means filled or well supplied with something. So if I cannot use his poetic verse, let me read it again. O Lord, that lends me life, lend me a heart filled or well supplied with thankfulness. And I know that that needs to be my prayer request here, today, but also tomorrow. And again, I know I speak to a congregation and people who have gone through difficult times, some of you far more difficult than I. But I know that the God of Daniel and the God of Paul, the God who sent Jesus to die on the cross for my sins, when I think of things that I'm thankful for, I cannot believe when the Father knew what his Son was going to go through, that he turned his back and allowed his Son to suffer. Something God could have said, stop it. And he allowed his Son to suffer for me, who has done him so much wrong. I have so much to be thankful for. This Christmas season just screams at us thankfulness. Not for the gifts that we can give. We can be thankful for that, but even more so, different from what the world talks about, will make you feel good. Knowing that God sent Jesus, and it was his plan when Adam and Eve sinned, not when we were good, but when we had sinned, apart from his pleasing, that he put into motion the plan of sending his Son. And it wasn't a mistake. God knew it, that people would reject him and that he would be crucified and he would suffer greatly. And he would suffer greatly for Joel, suffer for you. He would give his life. And I have, if nothing else, if the wheels come off and our finances aren't great and our team doesn't win, God is still good. And he still gives us reason to be thankful for. But the same thing that they did in the Old Testament, where they had people who made it their job, it was their job to be thankful. We need to be people like that too, just reminding one another of all that we have to be thankful for. Thank you for being a loving congregation. Thank you for your being intentional to make Jesus a part of the things that you do and who you are. Thank you for that. Thank you for your example and your testimony where you are. I'll tell the young people, I said, I'm up here and I'm teaching, or whether it was Emily or it was Wes or myself, I said, we're up here teaching, but I said, we will not touch the lives that you will touch. I'm so thankful for our young people and where they take Jesus where they're at. I love that. I love how you do that too. Thank you. Thank you most of all, Jesus, for being a reason for thanksgiving.